they'll still be able to hear me. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Census Bureau Director Robert L. Santos. Rob Santos earned a Bachelor of Arts in Mathematics from Trinity University after attending San Antonio Community College, and then a Master's in Statistics from the University of Michigan, where he honed his skills at the Survey Research Center of the Institute for Social Research. And for those that don't know, that's sort of the premier social research institute in the country. Rob writes of himself, "I have a passion for policy research and helping society to become more informed about public issues. It is incredibly rewarding to apply statistical principles and tools to studies of pragmatic real-world problems and to help researchers develop rigorous scientific approaches to collect and analyze data for policy insights." Now, Rob has a very impressive list of honors and appointments. And because time is short, and because I'm a statistician, you'll recognize that the few I'm choosing to tell you about are all related to statistics. Okay, Rob was the 116th president of the American Statistical Association. Prior to that, he was honored as a fellow of the American Statistical Association, and he also received the ASA's most prestigious award, the Founders Award. So he's kind of got the real trifecta there. He's got all the big events in the or big awards positions in the ASA. Now, many of you know that Rob's primary reason for visiting NC State this weekend is to receive an honorary doctorate of sciences. Since he was coming to campus anyway, I presented him with two other opportunities. One, delivering the commencement address at the Department of Statistics graduation ceremony this afternoon, and speaking at this AGEP event. I was expecting that his schedule would probably prevent him from doing either one. When he agreed to both, I was surprised, pleased almost to the point of being giddy. This is really great for NC State, for this program, for the Department of Statistics. I think it speaks volumes when a person who has dedicated their life's work to national and global policy issues also finds time to contribute at the local events such as our department graduation and this AGEP event. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Director Santos.
Well, thank you very much. Let's see, let me go down here. I'm not that tall, and I have a very soft voice. So, good morning. Buenos dias. Yeah. So, I'm a Latino. As some folks know, I was born and raised in San Antonio. And I'm going to tell you a few remarks that talk about a little bit about identity, but also tie in to how that translates into my statistical work and my work as a leader of the largest federal statistical agency. So I'll also tell you a little bit, I'll tell it in the context of stories, because I like to tell stories. I think that's sort of, there's something fundamental about learning from those. And I'm going to go through a few stories. And the first one is really, I hope you don't mind, it's kind of interesting. When I was a kid, I'd say about 6 or 7 years old. And it's going to tie in at the end to some of the summary remarks that I have. So back then, you know, I grew up in the barrios in San Antonio, and we had a little bungalow house that was real creaky and such. And the winters, you know, in San Antonio, they don't get that cold, but even, you know, 50 is cold to us out there. And so, you know, I was all bundled up. I was sleeping, you know, shared a bedroom with my big brother. And I was sleeping one night, and the wind was howling outside, and I was just fast asleep on my back. And I was startled awake, and I felt something, on the bed. And apparently a little mouse had crawled up to the bed, and then it started walking along me, along my body on the side, and I just froze. And then it crossed over my chest on the blanket, and then I just totally freaked out, and it ran off. So I screamed bloody murder, and then, hauled off and woke up the entire family, who was very annoyed. It was like 3 a.m. And they were like, come on, it's just a mouse, they're everywhere back then anyway. And so, we went back to bed, and I just couldn't go back to sleep. And for several days after that, I was just totally frightened. I would not go to bed. I didn't want to go near the bedroom because I knew that there was going to be a repeat performance. Now, back then, my grandmother, my abuelita, who had raised me, because when my parents would go off, to work before school, before I started going to school, she was one of my trusted people. And so one day, a few days after that, she came over to the house, and she walked in, and she said, "You get over here." And so she took me to the bedroom. She laid me down on the bed, and then she walked outside. I said, "Okay, what's going on?" And so I went and I peeked through the window, and she was taking up a palm branch and breaking it off. And then she, just a little length like this with the leaves on it. And she walks back in, and she says, "Get back in the bed. What's wrong with you?" And so I lay down again. She says, "Close your eyes." And I was like that. And I started hearing her whispering a prayer. And she started moving the branches over my body. And then she was finished, and she said, "Okay, get up. You're fine now." And she had given me the asusto blessing. And she had come from Mexico in the early 1900s, fleeing the Mexican Revolution, and she came from Parras, Coahuila, and she was just doing what she knew. She was using her culture, her life experience. This was the way that she was helping her grandchildren. And believe it or not, I was cured. So I wasn't afraid anymore. I would go to bed every night. And that stuck with me, but what didn't stick with me until later on, after a lot of reflection, was how powerful that was for the rest of my life. And to help sort of give you a little bit more context about sort of me and my identity as a Latino and such, I'll fast forward 2.5 decades and say that, I was, 28 going on 18, and I looked younger than I was. And so people would always like, what are you doing here? And I was at Temple University in Philadelphia. I was the sampling statistician and sampling manager. I had just finished my master's degree at Michigan, and my successes are defined by my failures. I did about 2/3, no, not 2/3. I did about a half of a dissertation, and then walked away from it. And became a sampling statistician at the Institute for Survey Research, Temple. And I was the sampling statistician and the manager. We were doing ginormous studies. And if please forgive me, I will talk simplistically because that's who I am. Plus, in my role as a leader and a director, serving the public, I'm trying really hard to keep it simple. And so I walked in, and we were doing these studies of new beneficiaries, national face-to-face interviews, 17,000 interviews, paper and pencil surveys, and I was designing the samples and selecting for them. And I had to build a staff. And so I was challenged. It was like, okay, I don't know anything about management or supervision or whatever, but I was bringing in all these undergrad students. And I figured, they were coming just to make a paycheck. And I said, I can't let them get away with that. So what I did is I made them a part of the learning process of the surveys that we would do. So I would have to put together these complex ways of, manually checking our samples and double checking and going through a process. Here are some protocols. And then I'd get them back together. I get them all together every week or so. And I'd say, okay, folks, we just defined, this protocol. And what do you think? What works, what doesn't? And they would give me feedback. And then it would be really good feedback. I'd know what worked and what didn't. And I'd say, okay, let's revise it this way. What do you think? And they just offer suggestions and such. And then I'd say, okay, stop everything you're doing, get out your resumes, and now write down that you help with process improvement, with quality control. And so each time we would do something and learn, I'd expose them to a different skill. I would help them build their resume. And I said, now, when you go off to, get whatever job you want, you can say, look, I've done these types of different things, and the employers are going to be impressed and they'll hire you. And so I organically learned based on my experience. I organically learned how to help people in a meaningful way. And I guess I need to bounce back a little bit. I went to 12 years of parochial school in San Antonio. And I'm sorry, I'm not religious, but those values really, really stuck with me. And I was a first generation college student. That is, my siblings were the first, because my parents, my father didn't make it past 8th grade, and my mom, she actually got a high school diploma, but only because my grandmother, her mom, lost her husband and wasn't able to support her, and had to become a full-time nanny and put her in an orphanage, and the orphanage got her through high school. So there were all these different aspects of my life that have built up with me. And by the time I got out of college and went to this first job at Temple, I knew two things. One of them is that I absolutely love statistics and wanted to save the world type of thing, do the best I can to help with society. And the second is I absolutely loved helping people. And that was part of the values that I brought with me from both parochial school and the Latino culture, well, familia. So I went through that thing in Temple, and then ended up going back to Michigan to be the director of survey operations there at the Survey Research Center for several years. And lo and behold, here's a master's student. And I was asked to be on a study section for the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ. And so I started going to these. It was just amazing. I was the only master's student in this room full of renowned MD researchers and public health researchers and health and so forth. It was just an amazing experience. I learned a lot. And you guys know the routine. I hope that everybody, there's like 100 grant applications, and each individual's assigned a few of them, but you're responsible for reading all of them and doing an assessment, and then coming up with you do discussions, and then you score them. So there was this one application that wasn't assigned to me that really caught my eye, and it actually launched who I am as a Latino researcher. It was about, this was before the Affordable Care Act. So people who were uninsured, actually, that was a big issue for institutions, hospitals, clinics, etc. because they would have to pay, they wouldn't be able to get any money for serving those individuals. And a health researcher came to this committee, with an grant application. And it was, from a statistical point of view, it was absolutely spectacular. I mean, there was a clinical trial. The power was correct. The framing of the we're going to do this particular statistical test. That particular thing was fine. The analysis plan was fine. There was nothing anyone could complain about from the technical perspective. It was about how to provide a less expensive therapy for people without health insurance, specifically with regard to chronic pain. So at that time, if you had health insurance, you got the best meds, the best docs, and, they did that. And what this person wanted to do, this researcher, he said, look, people without health insurance, that's a big challenge to the health industry. I have a potential solution. What we can do is we can do a clinical trial where half of them get the regular care, and there's a financial hit on the institution. And the other half, what we'll do is we'll give them transcendental meditation. So, basically meditate, and it'll help you deal with your pain and such. And we think it's going to work. Here's the literature review, here's the conceptual framework. And so there I was sitting there, I was thinking, okay, what's wrong with this picture to me? But on the other hand, here's something that's designed to help both. It was pitched as a win-win situation. The healthcare industry doesn't have to suffer financial losses as much, while at the same time, the population in need gets served. And I don't know if anyone here, by the way I've described it, sees what the issue was. But when it came time to vote, all of the reviewers, the primary reviewers, said, this is a spectacular thing. It's a solution that we need. Let's go down and do it. And do people see the advantage of that? Okay, so I, the sole Latino person of color in this room full of grandiose researchers, I raised my hand and I told them, look, if we fund this, we're going to be, how can I best say this? We're going to be propagating a two-tier health system. If you have health insurance, step over to door number one. You're going to get the best meds, the best, the best physician, therapy and thinking and such. You don't have health insurance? Go over to step back to door number two, and we're going to help you think through your pain. I said, we cannot use this type of research to promote a two-tier health system. If it's actually a good therapy, it needs to be open to everyone. There's lots of people with health insurance that don't like to take meds. So why not open it to everyone? I said, we cannot fund this thing as it exists. And I was really, really nervous because it was the first time I'd ever spoken up like that. And it was very easy in terms of the power structure. We're all taught that in terms of masters versus PhD and such. The first time that I was in great fear that they're going to say, you don't know what you're talking about, kid, and then just go out and do what they wanted. But fortunately, they listened and they sent the proposal back. Now, I never followed up to see whether they recouched it. But the strong message was, the way this thing's framed, it ain't going to work. We need to rethink it. And it's a lesson that showed that my life experience, based on what I knew back in the barrio, I know that my abuelita, I wouldn't want her to have a different standard of healthcare than people with health insurance. So there was no way that I could not speak up, that I couldn't, there was no way that I wouldn't use my own culture, my own values, my own life experience to say something. And that began a journey then for me to go through and start promoting that type of thinking. And that's kind of like a message, the broader message of what this particular talk is going to be about. It's about, you all are professors, you're teaching students. Those students, they have their own life experiences, they have their own cultures, regardless of race or ethnicity. They need to bring that to the table and use that in the context of their critical thinking. So yeah, as statisticians or engineers or whatever, we're given a set of tools, technical tools. They can be really powerful, but if you don't then infuse them with your culture, your values, your life experience, you actually are going, you're going to miss a huge opportunity to do better science, to get more relevant information, better insights, more accurate data. So that's basically the story of what I have to offer in terms of using one's whole self. Now, it all kind of wraps up. There are a lot of folks that do social science as well as mathematics, etc. And I want to tell another story where it's more about, it reveals the absence of diverse perspectives and what happens when you do that. So this time around, it was back in 1999, there was a health research conference, and I was invited to give commentary. This was right at the start where people were beginning to value cross-cultural research. And I basically got up and I wanted to tell the story. It was something that I'd been thinking about for, like, it had been 2 decades now. But even back when I was a student at Michigan, all the Latino students would all say, look, in terms of research, especially in the social sciences, but really it impacted everybody. There's this self-propagation of, here's the way to do research, and here are the questions to ask, and you need to do it this way. And we'd all say, look, it's so biased, this thinking. And so at this conference, it was going to be the first time that I would express to a group of health survey researchers, some of the most prominent ones in the field, that look, the stuff that we're doing now, the way that we're conceiving research, the way that we're asking questions, the way that we're analyzing it, is from a very specific perspective. Back then, they didn't have words like, racism or, well, they did, but they weren't being used in terms of the context of informing. The DEI, that didn't exist, things of that sort. And so I said, these were more along the lines of a Western culture context. Really a European almost context. And I used the example of a healthcare battery of questions called the SF-36. They were developed in 1992. And there was this one question on mobility that was asked. And it was something to the effect of, do you do daily activities to keep you healthy, like house cleaning, golfing, bowling? Well, this was before Tiger Woods. Back then, who played golf? And back then, who bowled? It was pretty much a white society that did that. And even for golfing, it was people that lived in country clubs. Here was an exact example that illustrated that the individual who developed that specific question was using their perspective of their life to infuse into how this was going to be asked. Now, I totally get it. And in fact, I just finished advocating. You got to bring your life experience, your culture, etc. So that was a biased perspective, but sometimes biased perspectives are okay when you combine them. So what was missing at the time that that question was conceived were the alternative perspectives of the Latino community, the African American community, the Asian community, etc. If you would have put all of those together at the time the question would be written, I guarantee you it would not have come out the way that it did. It would have been better. It would have been more informed. It would have led to less bias. So that's another example. There are many examples. There is actually a VBAC calculator. I don't know if anybody has heard about that. But basically, in pediatrics, up until actually a couple of years ago, maybe, you were given a score. Pediatricians would give expecting moms a score. And simply if you were African American or Latino, they would bump up that score for no other reason and recommend that you get a cesarean. And when that was revealed, finally people said, okay, we need to retrench that. And it was a bad thing. I actually went to I was on a National Academies panel for Social Security Administration, looking at representative payees. These are folks that take the check on behalf of somebody and then distribute the funds. And they wanted to look at fraud. We need to detect fraud because there's so much fraud going on. And they were going to do a predictive analysis, logistic regression technique. And I said, at the beginning, they do this wonderful thing. Everybody talks about their biases that they're bringing in to the research that's about to be done by the panel. And my comment was, look, folks, we're going to do some predictive analysis. We will not. I don't want to be a part of, and you shouldn't be a part of, any analysis that puts in as a predictor the race or ethnicity of an individual. Because we should not be coming out of this investigation, of this research, saying that the way to identify fraudulent representative payees is if you're Black or Hispanic. Now, I don't even want it to be in the equation. There are plenty of other variables that show that can indicate what the risk factors are, but they're not going to be race or ethnicity. And the same principle applies to in terms of justice policy. You see that with AI and some of the algorithms that were going on. So that was the other perspective. And then the final one, that the little story that I'm going to tell, has to do with clinics and institutions. So, as part of this AHRQ review process, I would get newsletters on research of the day. And I was reading the newsletter, and then one day there was this little excerpt, and it said, "Oh, here's a research project that came out really well." Excuse me. And it was about clinical research on people with Spanish language, patients who spoke Spanish. And the finding was, they did a clinical trial, and they said, when Spanish-speaking patients go to clinics, and either the administrator or the clerk or someone, oh, thank you so much, when at least some of the staff know a little bit of Spanish, they do better. The outcomes of the patients are better than in those clinics where nobody speaks Spanish at all. So I don't know about you, but my first impulse was to laugh out loud, right? Like, come on, of course. But then it hit me, okay? It hit me. This was the first instance where a research grant funded by the government showed that an institution, the clinics, the healthcare folks, were acculturating to a more diverse population. So it was the institution that was actually changing instead of the classic victimization that you have the problem, we're going to treat you. You need to learn English. You need to do this. You need to do that. Instead, it was the institution. And it grew into me this insight that all of these outcomes are actually the result of a two-party interaction. The patient, the individual who's trying to make a living or to survive or to be healthy, and the institution. And what's going on is that there's an interaction between the two that's either productive or it isn't. And going further, when we think about power structures, it reveals to me that I hate to say it too strongly, and this is really from all of the 40 years of policy research that I've done over the course of my career. It ends up being that there's two parties involved, that in the power structure and so forth, that we too often provide, okay, here are SNAP benefits, here's an employment training, here's this or that. They're really sort of like, let's help them without realizing that the net result of the interaction of the system, so to speak, with the individual is really what's determining the outcome. And because of that, many of the programs that we see are doomed to failure. That is, there needs to be more than simply helping them. There's another patient, the industry, the healthcare industry in this case, sort of systems, institutions that need help just as well. And it's akin, yeah. So I guess I'll stop there. I shouldn't say more than that, other than we really need treatments for both parties, and not just the folks who end up being victimized. The bottom line is I'm expressing sort of from my identity, from my life experience, that things that I've learned that actually don't have, some folks might say it doesn't have a lot to do with statistics, but I would argue that it has everything to do with statistics. Statistics is a tool to help generate knowledge, to generate insight. And you have to be able to do critical thinking in order to properly generate the insight that advances society to the next level. And if you think about it, all students, and especially students, of color, in my opinion, have specific life experiences and cultures, etc., that they need to combine with their technical experience so that they can generate better science and more accurate data and more relevant data for us. That's the message that I've been giving all the colleges and university students that I've met. It's the message that I've been given to faculty. We need to allow students to look to themselves to generate new insights, to become leaders. Actually, the last thing I'll say on this is that I actually advise students to do something that I know is going to just curdle your blood as researchers. When they're thinking about, I tell them, when you're thinking about a problem, what do your professors, not all professors, what do your professors say in English? Go do the lit review and then come back to me and say, what's your problem? I tell them, no, you need to do it the other way. First, think about the problem. Use your own life experience, your own culture to think through what are the underlying mechanisms for that? What's going on from your perspective? And then go look at the literature because that's the way you develop new, innovative, creative thinking. And that's the value of diverse perspectives. It doesn't come from simply having numbers. It comes from the people who have different ways of thinking and using their life experience to come forth and leverage that to create something new. And that's why I'm a big advocate of diversity in the workplace. That's what I'm doing at the Census Bureau, actually. I'm pitching, because I've lived that experience, the value of diversifying the workforce, because those diverse perspectives, when you bring them together, create a new level of creativity and innovation that otherwise wouldn't exist. I've seen it, I've given examples of it, and I could talk about it all day, but I think I'll stop there and say I'm open to questions. Thank you very much.